you'll bear with me. There is an emergency I'm attending to, and I'll be contributing. So I'll be on and off. So I hope you could understand. Salonka will perhaps take the bigger chunk of this meeting. So perhaps what I will add is just when I get to be active again. So I hope it is a success and the meeting will be quite fruitful. Like Salonka said, this is our last engagement this year. It's been uh it's been amazing. The ride has been bumpy, but we've been through it, and I hope as we progress into the next year, inshallah, it will be sort of an advent of greater things to come. Time flies, and I will repeat this: time does fly, and barely 3 months, and you'll be doing your bar exams. So don't lessen your safety belts. Keep them fastened so that at the end of the day, we all have something, to smile about. And when your results are out, it will be worth it. And you wouldn't feel perhaps some regrets because maybe you didn't get to join in, some session or these meetings that we always have and what have you. But like I said, I do believe in each and every one of you. So if you don't believe in yourself, I do believe in you, and I know you have that kind of potential to just break the glass ceilings. I'd like all of you to pass. The bar needs you. We are actually in need of lawyers and advocates out here. So let not anyone convince you otherwise. That because we have an influx of lawyers at the moment, that we need not have more lawyers. So we need more advocates, and you're the people who are actually going to fill that space. So keep sharpening your iron, keep reading, and keep praying, because at the end of the day, God's grace has to be sufficient to ensure that each and every activity that we do got, ourselves involved with, are actually, based on His foundation. So that's all, and I hope so longer you will, drive this meeting until when we will come to a close. So if I get time to contribute, I will unmute my mic. So thank you very much. Back to you, Salonka.
Thank you, Lavins. Thank you. So yeah, it goes without saying that we will all pass. You will all pass. I mean, we will all pass. Yesterday I was in school. I cleared. It was a very, very good feeling. I was looking back for the past 6 years, 4 years in campus, 2 years in Kenya School of Law, and yeah, the journey is worth it. So everything will be all right. We'll all pass and you'll all do great. So today we'll be doing Conveyancing 2018, and before we begin, maybe one or two can tell me what's your perception of conveyancing? What do you think about conveyancing? And generally, what's your feel towards that unit? And something I can assure you is that in your practice, you may try as much as possible to avoid conveyancing, but it's one of the areas of law where you will really have to engage. You will have to engage it in some type of way. Even if it's not fully, you will have to engage it in some type of way. A client will walk into your office, tell you, draft for me a sale agreement. A client will come to your office and say, okay, we have properties that are registered in my name and the name of my brother. How can we split our interests? A client will come to you and say, there's some people who want to steal my piece of property. There's some people who want to fraudulently transfer my property. How can we prevent such a thing from happening? All this falls under the ambit of conveyancing. Yes? So just in a few, before we begin this unit, I will teach you how to fast read conveyancing, how to pass conveyancing, because that's one unit I really believe you can study in a week and you'll be done reading the entire conveyancing unit completely. In a week and you're done covering everything to do with conveyancing, because it's a simple topic, it's easy to understand, and it's really practical. It's extremely practical. So maybe one or two volunteers, and then now we begin. Just hurry up, and then now we begin. Any volunteer, what's your feel towards conveyancing? What do you think about it? What's your take? Is it challenging? Is it easy? Anyone who's in the meeting? I can see hands raised up. Or I pick randomly. I'm seeing Baby Kelvin. Kevin, what do you think about conveyancing? What's your take about conveyancing?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, Kevin.
Okay. My perspective on conveyancing is that it is not necessarily a difficult or easy subject. It just depends on the effort that you put in to actually understand the processes, because they're all available if you just research appropriately and work to find out the information. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good. That's good. Now, how do you read for conveyancing personally for you?
Our lecturer said we need to really focus on processes. So what I usually do is I pick on a topic, say charges, and instead of going into the whole theoretical aspect, I just try to find out, if I was given work to register a charge, how would I go about it? And I walk to the conveyancing department, ask some questions about what exactly they do, and then I also try to get any information online. But as you understand the process, you need a lot of practicality, and I usually understand better if someone who's actually done it explains what is involved in the process.
Yeah, that's actually it. That's conveyancing. And I'm actually happy that you've mentioned the core essence of conveyancing. In the ATP program, it's all about the processes and the procedures. They don't deal much with substantive, so they won't tell you to define, talk about this, explain what the mirror principle is, cut-in principle. All those you did in undergrad and a land law. In conveyancing, it will be, how do you register? How do you do this? What is the process for this? How do you go about this? So it's all about the processes and procedures when you're reading conveyancing. And that's it. Now maybe one extra person, and then now we go on. We go on to the question paper we're going to be doing today, Conveyancing 2018. So I'm seeing Glory, Kairi. Glory, in just 2 minutes. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. So for me, I find conveyancing to be it's an interesting course, interesting subject. But well, so far personally, I would say I've been struggling to understand the procedures. I think they're a bit much, but anyway, we'll manage. How I study for conveyancing, I just try and go through the acts just bit by bit to ensure that I try and understand as much as possible and link it to whatever it is we've been learning practically in class. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So don't worry, it's a fairly easy unit, and I can assure you, of all the 9 units you'll be doing during the exam time, conveyancing is the only unit that you can actually do and finish with 30 minutes remaining, because that's what happened. The thing is, when people get questions like this, just to start, when you get a question, for instance, question number 1, advise Mr. and Mrs. Baraza on the nature of transaction they intend to get to. I haven't read. But what the examiner wants you is to go straight to the point. And this is something with conveyancing lecturers and the examiners and the markers. They want you to go straight to the point. Don't write so many things. Go straight to the point and advise what type of transaction is that. Discuss the steps, highlighting them one by one. They don't want you to start explaining, what is a loan? What is this? No. So it's all about going straight to the point, and you will hack it and you will manage it. Now, before we begin with the question paper, let me take you through how to read a conveyancing paper, first of all, or how to read for or prepare for a conveyancing exam, because that's crucial. Last year, the first question in conveyancing was on transmission. Actually, the entire paper last year was on transmission and leases. These people will come out and say, you know, we weren't taught this, we weren't taught this, but all these things are in a very simplified, can I say, source of laws, something of the sort, because there are actually only 3 acts or or procedural legislations or regulations that you need to read for you to pass a conveyancing exam. And I didn't open them. I just wanted to show you, first of all, where it is before we go on. So, sorry, I'm here. So you go to Kenya law. The acts that you will need are, let me just open it, legal notices, laws of Kenya, legal notices, and then 2017. So open legal notice number 277, legal notice number 278. Okay, so we have 2, and then let's go to legal notice number 281, to 8 and 281. This one, Land Act regulations. Okay, they don't test much about it, but you can also check the Community Land Act regulations. Conversion of land. And yeah. So let's start with that 278. Let me download 278. Let me download 277. So I hope you can see my screen, because I can't see you guys from your end. I hope you can see my screen. So in 5 minutes, I'll show you how to read for conveyancing, then I will go tackle the questions. So you can see my screen, yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, nice, perfect. So let's start with 278. In fact, you can leave alone all the others, but 278, make sure you read for 278. So let's start with 278. So up here, you can see it's 196 pages, but I can assure you 3/4 of it are forms. The only substantive bits are 30-something pages or so. So let me just open it. Yeah, it's up to here. 33 pages. You only need to read 33 pages for legal notice number 278, and you will be done. And for legal notice number 278, also known as the land registration, land registration general regulations, this is where you get, for instance, what's the process of registering a charge? What's the process of creating an easement of a piece of property? What is the process of creating a lease? What is the process of transferring? What is the process of transmission? So last year, what they did is they brought transmission. To be honest, the lecturers weren't keen and they never taught it well during class time. But if you read legal notice number 278, that paper would have been a walkover for you, because it had all the provisions to do with transmission. What happens on transmission? And you understand transmission, yes? Let's say somebody dies, how does property go from the estate of the deceased person to the beneficiaries, estate of the deceased person to the administrator, and then to the beneficiaries, estate of the deceased person to the administrator, or then to a third party, and so forth. That's all to do with transmission. So that's legal notice number 278. So have it in your reading list. It's only 33 pages. That is for legal notice number 278. Now, legal notice number 277 It's not that important or so, but it's good for you to familiarize yourself with it. It's only roughly 7 pages. But the essence of gist in legal notice number 277 is the fact that it created land registration units and land registry in respective counties. So for instance, you will get a title, a question that provides for a title. The title is written Kajiado slash where? Kajiado slash Kimana slash something. Then the question down below asks you, in which registry will this land be registered? Will this transfer be registered? Which registry will you go to? So you see, if you see Kajiado, you will know that that's a registration unit. Yeah? Let me show it to you here. Here it is. Kajiado is a land registration unit. So it's a land registration unit. What is the registry that serves Kajiado? It's the registry in Kajiado still. Where is it found? In the county known as Kajiado. So that's as simple as that. So it's not that important, but if you just have a glimpse at it, maybe take 5 minutes, go through it, you'll be good to go. So that's 277, 278. Now let's go to another one, to be specific, legal notice number 280. Let's go to 281 and 280. Actually, not 280. Let's start with 280. 280. So this is legal notice number 280. Let me open 281 because 281, our exam brought this. The examiners brought this last year. Extension and renewal of leases. So it's all here. How do you renew a lease? Yeah. How do you extend a lease? What is the difference between renewal and extension of a lease? And the same thing applies. This thing is 36 pages, but you only need to read 6 pages because the rest are forms. The rest are forms. The rest are forms. The majority of it are forms. So you need to read like, okay, it won't go past 10, 15 pages. So have it on your reading list also. Land registration, not land registration, Land Act Extension and Renewal of Leases Registration. That's legal notice number 281. The Land Act Extension and Renewal Regulations 2017. And then now we have legal notice number 280, which is basically the Land Act regulations. So you may get, for instance, a question to do with compulsory acquisition. What is the subsidiary, not the subsidiary, what is the procedural law governing issues to do with, for instance, compulsory acquisition. What else? Issues to do with conversion of freehold and leasehold, which is 99 years, Article 65 of the Constitution, reparcellation, amalgamation, change of user. That's a very common question. Change of user. And what else? So that's compulsory acquisition and so many things. So it's 60 pages, but how many pages will you be needed to read? So you're seeing all these are forms. Below are forms. You don't need to read for the forms. They can't ask you to draft a form. For instance, you can't be told to draft a charge in an exam. You'll be told maybe to list parts of a charge or list the essence or the essentials of a charge and so forth. But you can't be told to draft a charge instrument in an exam setting. So in legal notice number 280, what you will be required to read is roughly, give also 16 pages, and you're good to go. So if you dedicate and give yourself a day to read for conveyancing, you can finish reading the entire conveyancing unit in one day, and you are assured you're going to pass because it's a relatively easy area, as I said. It's practical, it's straight to the point, and that's it. So that's what you need to read for conveyancing. So I hope you've noted that down. Legal notice number 278, legal notice number 277, legal notice number 280, and 281. Those are the most important pieces of legislation that you need to read before you sit for the conveyancing exam. And you won't be surprised about where they removed or where they got the question from, because they can't go outside that area. So it's better you start preparing right now, and everything will fall out and play out in your favor. So I'll repeat again for those maybe who don't know the full names. So I'm saying legal notice 278 because it's easier, but 278 is the Land Registration Act General Regulations. Land Registration Act General Regulations. Legal notice number 277, Land Registration Act Registration Units Order 2017. We have legal notice number 281. Here it is, Land Act Extension and Renewal Regulations 2017. And we have legal notice number 280, the Land Act Regulations. Those are the most solid and pertinent pieces of legislation that you need to read before you engage in a conveyancing paper. So up to there, does anyone have any questions? Before now we begin with the past paper. Anyone with a question? Yes, Kyoko Kennedy, please go on.
Can you go back to the can you go back to the window where you read the legal notices 277 and 278?
Okay. Here it is. This 277 and this 278.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So if you're finding it difficult to trace it in what? If you're finding it difficult to trace it by following the long process of going to Kenya law, I think there's also, you can just write LN 278, sorry, LN 278 of 2017. It will actually bring it. Yeah, it is. 281, you can write 281 and it will take you to the specific legislation. So I've listed 4. So is that okay, Kyoko? Should we proceed?
Yes, sir. It's okay.
Okay. Higher. Thank you. So who will do us the honors and read for us question 1, kindly? Hello. Could someone kindly read question 1?
Question 1.
Yeah.
So long.
You are acting for Mr. and Mrs. Baraka. They own a property registered in as Nairobi, block 144/2. The property is valued at 20 million Kenyan shillings. The couple took out a loan of 10 million Kenyan shillings from NCN Bank in the year 2010. The loan balance includes interest chargeable at 2 million Kenyan shillings. Your clients have approached KCK Bank for a loan of 8 million Kenyan shillings. Okay. A, Roman 1, advise Mr. and Mrs. Baraka on the nature of transaction they intend to get into, 2 marks. Roman 2, discuss the steps you will follow to ensure your clients get the 8 million Kenyan shillings loan. Roman 3,
Sorry. Like, she's still there. Mercy, please go on. Please go on. Okay, Roman 3 is discuss your role as the advocate for Mr. and Mrs. Baraka in the above transaction. So let's start with A before now we delve into the others. Someone tell me, what do you think? What's the nature of this transaction? What's the nature of this transaction? And then kindly don't lift your hand, just unmute, because I can't see you because I'm projecting my screen. So just unmute and then we'll do the rest. What's the nature of this transaction? Oh, Mercy's call dropped, so it's fine.
Hello, guys.
Yes, Chris, go on.
It should be most of the transactions should be a charge. Perhaps a further charge. But let's just start with the charge. The nature, to my thinking, I'd first think charge.
You'll say a charge, yes? Okay. Now, you've mentioned a charge. The question is 2 marks. There's okay, I don't know how CLE marks their papers, but there was a notion we had that we usually got that they gave maybe half a mark for every answer you give. So I'm not sure. It's not 100% accurate information, but let's say, for instance, you've just mentioned a charge. You've been given half a mark. Now, how would you add so as to get the full 2 marks in that paper? So you're correct. It is a charge transaction. How now do you add more marks to your to
This scenario, first, the way I handle it, I mentioned that this type of the nature of this transaction is a charge. Then I'll define what a charge is, and I'd go to state what the rights and the obligations of Mr. and Mrs. Baraka have this transaction. And then I'll proceed to advise them on how they can realize in acquiring a charge.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. That's pretty accurate. Now, how I would approach this question is, now you have to read questions very carefully. So in the second paragraph, they've given out some additional information, which is the couple took out a loan of Kenya shillings 10 million from NCN Bank. So there's one bank, there's NCN Bank, and they took out that loan in the year 2010. The loan balance, including interest chargeable, is Kenya shillings 2 million. The loan balance is what? 2 million. Now, your clients have approached KCK Bank for a loan of Kenya shillings 8 million. So we have 2 banking entities. There's NCN and there's KCK. So it is a charge transaction, yes. But which type of charge transaction? As I open for you the law, please engage as I open for you the law.
I want to give an answer.
Yes, go on.
I'd say it's subsequent charge or a second charge.
Yes, that's it. It's a subsequent or a second charge. Pursuant to what? Which section of the law? 56 of the Land Registration, 56 or 57? The Land Registration Act. LRA, not the Land Act, the Land Registration Act. Sorry. It's 57, yes? Yeah. So there it is. Section 57 of the Land Registration Act. So what does it say? A proprietor whose land or lease is subject to a charge may create a second or subsequent charge in the same manner as the first charge, and the same provisions shall apply. So you see, there's already a charge transaction in place in this question, because you're told took out a loan of Kenya shillings 10 million from ends in the year 2010. The loan balance, including interest chargeable, is 2 million. Your clients have approached for a loan of Kenya shillings 8 million. So this will be a second charge. And now to solidify your answer, you will bring in about section 57 of the Land Registration Act. And you leave it at that. I think it's as clear as that. You leave it at that. What is the nature of the transaction they intend to get to? They intend to get into a subsequent charge pursuant to Section 57 of the Land Registration Act. And this happens where an individual had charged their property initially, and subsequently, in consideration of them getting more financial facilities, they charge their property a second time. So it's a second or subsequent charge. And you leave it at that. Yeah. So up to there, we're fine. Anyone who has a question, please, before we go to part 2. Yes, go on.
Is there a difference between a further charge and a second charge? What's the difference if there is?
Okay. Now, on further charge, let me just open it for you. So it's ranging in the Section 80s of the Land Act. Sorry. So here we are. We're in Section 82. We have Section 82. We have Section 56, and we have Section 82. We have 56, and we have 56, 57, and then I'll leave consolidation. Yeah, and then let me just open legal notice number 278. I just explain it here. Higher. So we are here. Now, these are the key concepts. You have a second charge, you have a second charge, you have a further charge, you have a subsequent charge, and so forth. Now, how I understood those two different transactions is this way. If you go check section 57. For Section 57, a second charge will apply whereby, so there's some noise on my background. So under Section 57, you have two banking entities. Now, for instance, here you have NCN and you have KCK. So what happens here, because you had an initial charge with NCN Bank, what will happen is KCK, if you enter into a transaction where another charge will be created, that will be known as a second charge. Okay, a second charge. Now, there are circumstances where you won't go to KCK, you will go to NCN still. NCN had given this person 10 million. Now, instead of him going to KCK, he goes back to NCN, and NCN is to do what? NCN is to add for him now this 8 million instead of KCK. Such a transaction now will be a further charge in simple terms. So let's talk about Equity Bank. So you approach Equity Bank in the year 2015. Now, in 2015, they gave you a loan of, let's say, 10 million shillings on your property, which is valued at 40 million shillings. What will happen is you will create a charge in that transaction. Then later on in the year 2017, or let's say 2018, you approach Equity Bank again, you need a further advance, or you need some more money. And obviously the bank will ask for security. So what kind of security will it be? We will create a further charge. But if you had approached Equity in 2015, and then later on in 2018, you go to another bank, let's say Stanbic Bank, there will be another charge created in that circumstance. And then that brings us to the topic of, to the term known as tacking, which was a bit confusing when we were discussing this in class. So somebody kindly, in brief, before now I go into the details, somebody please explain in your own terms, what do you think, what is tacking under Section 82 of the Land Act? What will you term as tacking in the Land Act? Hello, please go on.
Hello.
Hello, please go on.
Yeah. The way I understand tacking is like consolidation of charges. Yeah, like in the exams question we are having like two banks involved, meaning that the first bank is actually the one that holds the charge instruments. So if you are to get some loan advances from the second bank, it means that the first bank must release the charge instruments to the second bank. So I think that's how tacking would come in. Yeah, okay, but I stand to be guided.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Go on. Who else wants to give it a shot?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm going to give a scenario. For example, the first charge, you charge your property with, let's say, Equity Bank. And the second charge, Family Bank. Third charge, you go back to Equity Bank. So according to the first charge that was registered will be discharged.
The first that was
registered.
Yes.
Majority of charges will be discharged first. But tacking, since we have the first charges, Family Bank, I said first bank was Equity, second was Family, and third was Equity. In tacking, the third charge, which is Equity Bank, will be tacked into the first charge, which was also from Equity Bank, and so the third charge will be discharged earlier than the second charge from Family Bank. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, you're making sense. You're making sense. So, yes, you're actually making you're making sense to some extent. So let me first explain tacking, then I will go back to this entire thing. So for tacking, you will have, let's say, one bank, a charge. Let's say, for instance, Equity Bank. Equity Bank, when you're registering a charge, when you're entering into that charge transaction, into that specific instrument, when you talk about an instrument, we're talking about the charge instrument from LRA. Is it 56? Zip form. Let me just show you that instrument. Is it from LRA 56? Let me just open it. From LRA 43, let's see. It's supposed to be 50 something. Maybe it's 56, 52. A 56 memorandum of variation of charge, so we are close. I think it's 53. So I think it's 53. Yeah, now this is the charge instrument. So when we talk about tacking, what will happen is the chargee will include in this instrument. So additional provisions, there will be provisional 3 that provides for tacking. Now think of it, how do you tack in your shirt? Tacking, think of it, symbolize it in such a manner. So when they talk about tacking, a practical example will be you're entering into a charge transaction with, for instance, Absa Bank. And Absa, in the charge instrument, which is this one, LRA 53, notes the right for tacking. What Absa will do is they will continue providing for you loan advances. They will continue providing to you loan advances. You will be getting money on the current account. Now, what do I mean by a current account? The current account now will be this charge transaction. So let's give the title. Let's just give a hypothetical title. Title BBBBB. The charge instrument, the collateral or the consideration was, let's say, for 20 million. But what you're taking is you've taken only, let's say, 5 million. So in this instrument, what the bank will do, they will contain provisions on tacking on Section 82, whereby the bank will be giving you additional facilities, additional credit facilities, additional loans on the same account, on the same charge instrument. There's no need for you to go create another charge. Let's say today you took 5 million, you want to create another charge for 5 million, and then later on you create another charge for 6 million, and then later on you create another charge for 10 million, and so forth. On the same charge, you will be getting further advances or further credit. I think that's how it's written in that specific section 82. Subject to the provisions of this act, a chargee may make provisions in the charge instrument to make further advances or credit to the charger on a current or continuing account. So a further advance referred to shall not rank in priority to any subsequent charges unless the provision for further charges is noted in the register in which the charge is registered and so forth. So that's tacking. On the same account, you won't need to create another charge for you to get other credit facilities. Because typically what will happen is a bank will give you loan and you give collateral, and in the charge instrument, the consideration is 5 million. The amount being secured is 5 million. If you want an additional 5 million, you will need to create another charge in favor of the bank to secure that facility. So what will happen is the chargee will make a provision in the charge instrument to give you further advances on that same charge. No need to create another one. And that's the distinction between tacking and second and subsequent charges. And you can actually note, maybe you can do your due diligence. When you read the Land Act, the Land Registration Act, together with the legal notices there, you will note that they don't use, the terms that they use are second and subsequent charges, so forth. Further charges, those things used to happen with the previous regimes. But right now, the laws that we have, they provide specifically for second and subsequent charges. So, so typically, if you create in a transaction where you create another charge where there was a previous charge, that will fall under Section 57. So there will be a second charge, third charge, all those subsequent charges. Okay, second charge or a subsequent charge going on for all the interest or the charge interests that are being created. Okay, the initial charge, there's another charge. Now, for tacking, what will happen is no new charge is being created. You will just be given a continuing, you will be given further advances, further credit on the same account, which is that charge that you have. I don't know if that is clear. Now, if it makes sense. Does that make sense? Should I repeat it? Or you're satisfied up to there. You've understood the difference between Section 82 and second and subsequent charges. In fact, okay, people use, it's all about semantics. Going back to the first question I was asked about a further charge, second or subsequent charge. Okay, typically it will arise, a further charge will arise in a transaction where there's another charge transaction, maybe with the same bank and so on. But it's all about semantics. Under our land act right now, the land acts that we have, they don't use that term further charge or so. They use second or subsequent charge. So it's the same thing. It's just that, you know, we had previous land regimes, but currently the terms that are being used are second or subsequent charges. Further charges will happen, let's say it's those previous regimes. Right now, if you asked a question, and in the question you see there was a charge that was initially created, and now they want to create another charge, your mind should click to Section 57 of the Land Registration Act to do with second and subsequent charges. Your mind should click to that. If they talk about getting further advances on one charge, on the same charge, then your mind will automatically go click to Section 82 of the Land Act, which is on tacking. You get further advances on a current account, and that has to be noted in the register. That's fine, yes?
Yes.
Okay, if you have questions, just feel free to ask. So, yeah, so we, yes, Shaban.
So long.
Yes.
Isn't there a risk of the credit facility, the credit facility being more than the property being the instrument is created on? Like,
yeah, there's usually such risks are bound to happen. Such risks are there. But you see, remember, there's a bank. They usually do their due diligence, and they can never have a provision on tacking if they are not 100% sure that your collateral will secure that debt. So what will happen is they may decide to, let's say, create how can I put it? To create, okay, in the charge instrument, the amount that is being secured is, let's say 8 million. Yeah. What they will do is they will provide for facilities for you to get additional credit facilities, but they won't make it surpass the amount that is secured. Yes, the risk is there, but you know, these are banks. They have their own advocates, they have their own lawyers. The risk is always there, but they are always protected. So they won't do or enter into such a transaction if they are not adequately protected. They are usually adequately protected. Okay. And then you need to remember that, you know, tacking is not an automatic, right? It has to be registered in that instrument. So it has to be noted in that instrument. So we go on to the next question. So, okay, if you ask to talk about the transaction, you can say Mr. and Ms. Baraka want to create another charge on in favor of KCK Bank for a loan of 8 million. The transaction is a second or subsequent charge under Section 57 of the Land Registration Act. And yeah, keep it as simple as that. You have your marks and you go on to the next question, because I don't think there's anything else they want to. Maybe now you can explain, you can go on and explain in brief after you've exhausted and put it in black and white. You can now give a one-liner or two-liner of the whole essence of having a charge transaction. And it's typically where you have a chargee and a charger. The chargee, for the chargee to give you credit facilities, they need a security or a collateral that will ensure payment. And so that's the nature of the transaction. You have a chargee, you have a charger, and there's a creation of a security in favor of the chargee. So let's go to part B. Discuss the steps you will follow to ensure your clients get the 8 million loan. So somebody give it a try before now we move fast and go into the into the law on it. How will you go about such a transaction? Discuss the steps you will follow. Just unmute and jump right in. Sorry, come again. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm saying that will need to be get the consent of the first
Consent.
Yeah, consent.
What else? It's 4 marks. Consent, very right. Consent, that's the first one. Consent, what else? Now, let's go back to where I told you where we were discussing how to read for a conveyancing paper. Let's go to section legal notice number 278. So you're very right. Before this transaction goes on, you have to obtain the consent of the first chargee. Who's the first chargee? NCN Bank. Consent has to be obtained. So I have a consent. What else is there? Let me show you now where it is. I can give you the list. I can give you the answer directly, but it's better for me to show you how to go about it and how to read and how to get it from the law. So let's go to section charges, usually regulation number 60s, 60s. So yeah, so here it is. Higher. Regulation 67, regulation 69, and regulation 70. Those are the most important provisions for you to answer that question. So how do you go about it? First thing is consent. You have to obtain the consent of who? Of the first chargee. So after obtaining the consent of the first chargee, and you've been given consent, the next step will now go into securitization. So typically, ideally, how such a transaction will happen is you will receive a letter of offer from the bank. Okay. A letter of offer will be given by the bank. The letter of offer is given to the borrower, the person who wants to borrow the money. Once the borrower signs and executes the letter of offer, they've now entered into a loan agreement. They've concluded a loan agreement. The bank and the borrower have agreed. The bank has agreed to advance certain loan facilities to the borrower on the creation of a security. Now, the security is a charge of a piece of property. Let's call it a Kajiado Isinya property. So, letter of offer, first step, the letter of offer given to the borrower. The borrower executes it. They enter into a loan agreement with the bank. Now, the next step is there will be instructions by the bank to do what? To go create a security in their favor to secure the sums of money that is paid to the borrower. Now, this is a question: who drafts the charge? Who prepares the charge instrument? Is it the bank or is it the charger? Is it the chargee or is it the charger? It's the bank that prepares the charge instrument. Yes. So the next step will be preparation of the charge instrument by the advocates for who? By the advocates for the chargee. After they prepare the charge instrument, after the bank, the advocates of the charge prepare the charge instrument, what they will do is they will send it to the charger for execution. After it's sent to the charger for execution, the charger will now, the charger is the borrower. The charger, okay, the charger is typically not the borrower, but the person on whose land the creation is being secured. There are transactions where, let's say there's a husband, okay, let's say there are two brothers. Let's say me and my brother. So my brother wants to borrow 2 million, but he doesn't have a piece of property for the bank to create a security. What will happen is the brother can come to me and I can give my property for the creation of the charge instrument. So the borrower in essence will be my brother, but the charger will be me. Oh, that's clear. So after the bank, after the charger executes, he sends the documents back. After the documents are sent back, the advocates for the charger now will advance it to the bank, where the duly constituted attorneys of the bank will now execute, and then there will be a validly executed charge instrument. So that's step, I think we're on step 4. After that is done, the documents have been properly executed. What is the next step? What is the next step? And this is where this one comes in. An application for registration of a charge. So you will do an application for registration of that charge, and the application will be done under Form LRA 9. So LRA 9 is just a blanket application form. It's out there, they call it a booking form, but it's just an application form. So whenever you want to register any interest over any piece of property, let's say a caution, let's say a transfer, let's say anything you want to do, any registration you want to do with the registry, you will lodge an application under Form LRA 9. I will show you how it looks like. So the next step after the charge has been validly executed is the lodging of this charge instrument for registration. How do you do it? You'll draft an application for registration of charge that is under Form LRA 9. And in that application, you have to do what? You have to attach various or support it by various documentation, which is the charge that has been validly executed, the land rent and land rates clearance certificates, spousal consents, if any. If that's a matrimonial property, you need to note it doesn't apply to all the properties. It applies to matrimonial property. You have to attach the consent that we were talking about. There is consent from the first chargee. You have to attach that consent. What else? And so forth. Now, that's the main process. But then you need to remember there are some nitty-gritties inside this transaction, such as stamp duty. So there has to be payment of stamp duty before your documents are registered. So how is stamp duty calculated on a charge? Somebody attempt it. What is the rate? And last year we asked a question on that. We were told to calculate stamp duty for a charge. Yes, please.
Let me give it a try.
Okay.
For the first charge is 0.2, and then for second charge is 0.1. For the first one, 0.2, and then the second one is 0.1, if I'm not wrong. Yeah.
Thank you. Legal authority for that?
Unfortunately, I don't have the legal authority for that.
Thank you. Stamp Duty Act. Okay, higher. Anyone else wants to give it a shot? You're actually there. Wants to attempt it? 0.1. 0.1%, yes. Who has another different answer from that?
0.05.
Okay, we have somebody who's brought out 0.05%. Okay, Who else?
0.001.
0.001%. Who else? Have you exhausted so that we now get to
4%?
Somebody has brought out 4%.
Municipalities.
Municipalities,
2% outside municipalities.
2% outside municipalities. 2% outside municipalities. Now remember, we're talking about a charge transaction. Yes, so we have different figures. There's 0.05, there's 0.1, there's 4%, and there's 2%. Which is which? Statutory backing. Go on now. So you have an idea. You all have an idea. But now the answer when it comes to charge transactions is, if it's a charge, it's 0.1% of the amount that is being secured. So let's say the charge is for 5 million. It's 0.1% of 5 million. That's for a charge. Okay. If it's a discharge of charge, it's 0.05%. Okay. If it's 4%, this one doesn't arise with charges. This one arises with transfer transactions. Let's talk about transfers. So if you're transferring a piece of property that is within a municipality, then the consideration will be, the stamp duty will be 4% of the sale of the transaction. So let's say you are selling or transferring that property for 4 million. The value of the transaction is 4 million. It's 4%. Stamp duty will be 4% of the 4 million. Then outside municipalities, what will it be? Outside municipalities, it's 2%. So just note it down. 0.05 discharge, 0.1% charge, 4% transfer, 2%. 4% is transfer of properties within municipalities, 2% properties outside municipalities. Is that fine up to there?
Pardon?
Okay, let me repeat. Stamp duty rate, the stamp duty tax rate, if it's a charge, it's 0.1%. If it's a discharge, it's 0.05%. Now, a discharge is a transaction where you had charged your property for 5 million, the bank had given you 5 million, you have finished paying your 5 million. Now you need your land to be unencumbered. You need that charge encumbrance to get out of your land. You need that encumbrance removed. What you do is you register a discharge of charge. Okay. So a charge is 0.1%, a discharge is 0.05%. For transfers of properties within a municipalities, 4%, outside municipalities, 2%. Sawa sawa. Is that fine?
Do you also pay stamp duty for freehold?
For?
Freehold.
Yeah. Stamp duty is for, even for freehold pieces of property. Freehold leases, whenever you have any sale transaction, leasehold transaction, the value, depending on the municipalities, will either be 4% of the consideration or 2%, not the consideration, sorry, I'm using that term, buddy, of the value. Because you see what happens is sometimes you may transfer your piece of land for 2 million, but then the government value projects the value to be 5 million. The stamp duty will be paid on the 5 million and not the 2 million. Because before you pay stamp duty, your property is taken for valuation. After valuation is done, you go generate a stamp duty payment e-slip. You pay for stamp duty based on the valuation by the government value, and then now your tax liabilities will have been deemed to have been paid. So for freehold, yes, you pay.
But are there any exemptions for stamp duty?
Yes, there are exemptions for stamp duty. So for instance, for transmission, let me just It's actually simple. For this, you don't even need to go to the Stamp Duty Act. Let's go to the KRA website. KRA Stamp Duty. KRA actually has simplified notes on this. That's what I read for when I was reading for my exams. So you can check that's understanding stamp duty payment, the process of paying stamp duty. Please note it down. We'll come back to this. KRA stamp duty exemptions. This is just the hack of studying for conveyancing. Anyway, okay, Stamp Duty Act is a bit wide. The answers are there. Yes, they are there in the Stamp Duty Act. If we start looking for them right now, we take some time. But just go to the KRA website. Everything to do with stamp duty is there. Simplified the process for paying for stamp duty, the exemptions for stamp duty. So you can check this website is slowly loading. But transfer of land to charitable organizations, that's one. Transfer of property between spouses, that's two. Transfer of property to members on the demise of a family member in whose name the property was registered. So in essence, what they're talking about is transmission. Stamp duty is exempted in that transaction. Is that fine? So it's just there, straightforward. There are other transactions where they've been exempted. Oh, here it is actually, it's open. So you can note it down. So these are just some of them, but there are others under the Stamp Duty Act. Is that fine?
So long I have a question. When you're looking about transfer of property, and we've said the stamp duty is 4% for municipality and 2% for outside. I think outside, yeah. Yes, then how do you tell whether that property is within a municipality? Say you're given a question, and then you're told that this particular property was in, say, Langata Shopping Center. Do you consider that a municipality just because the word town is there, or how do you tell, or is there in the act?
Okay, now typically, to be honest, this one, I won't even lie to you. For me to know whether property is municipality or not, I just ask paralegals or clerks. They know it. But if you get a question, for instance, Nairobi block 1442, that's within a municipality. If a question talks about a property and then there is the word township or something, you will know that automatically is a municipality. But if you get a title, for instance, Kajiado Isinya, something, etc., then you will automatically click that one's outside a municipality. So for municipalities, just go back to social studies. With the coming of this thing, what's it called? The 2010 Constitution, we did away with this municipality, the terms municipality. We now have counties, what else? Counties and so forth. So municipal, those are like terms, zile za kitambo. So just need to check previously municipality. Nakuru was a municipality. So if you see the property and it's located within Nakuru something previously, then you know that land or that piece of property was within a municipality.
Okay.
That's how I would go about it. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So you've seen the issue to do the stamp duty. So the law is under the Stamp Duty Act. The exemptions, they're listed under the Stamp Duty Act. So just go to Kenya law, you will check it under the Stamp Duty Act. Process of paying for stamp duty, it's as simple as just going to KRA website, and this is the system. It's as simple as that. So before you go to pay for it under the iTax portal, just remember there's valuation that has to be done. After valuation is done, you now go on and follow this process under the KRA website. So, generate a stamp duty payment slip, pay for it, then the rest follows. So that bit is discuss your role as an advocate for Mr. and Mrs. Baraka in the transaction. So they've just tried to twist the question, but back to you. Mr. and Mrs. Baraka, are they the chargee or are they the charger? Are they the chargees or the charger? charges. Baraka, Mr. Baraka. The charges. So what the question charges, yes. So what the question is asking in simple terms, what are the duties of an advocate for the charge? It's as simple as that, and it's 4 marks. You just list them and you get out of that question. So what are some of the what are some of the duties of the charges advocates? So the duties will go hand in hand with the steps. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I moved fast with the steps, but the steps started with the letter of offer, concluding a loan agreement, drafting of the charge instrument by the charge's advocate, sending it for execution by the execution by the charger. The charger returns it. It's then executed by the duly appointed attorneys of the bank. After they have been executed by the duly appointed attorneys of the bank, you lodge. Okay, even before lodging, you go for stamp duty payment, stamp duty e-slips, and so forth. So making sure that the stamp duty is paid. Then you lodge. You lodge the documents for registrations in the registry. How do you do that? You have an application form, which we said is Form LRA 9. The application form is supported by various documents. Those documents are: 1, the charge itself that has been properly executed. The charge, there's the consent from the first chargee. There's this rent clearance, rates clearance certificates. What else? What else was in there? Copy of the spousal consent if it's matrimonial property, and so forth. And you're done. We've listed like 6-7 steps, and you get your 4 marks, and you move away from that question. As simple as that. Now discuss your role as the advocate for Mr. and Mrs. Baraka. So in essence, asking what is the duty of the charge's advocates? So the duty of the charge's advocates are wants to huh?
If I may, Soronka,
Yeah, go on.
He's supposed to verify the charge document.
That's one.
And of course, yeah, and explain the same to the client, and also execute the same, and of course ensure that the client has ensure that the client has executed the same, and also he proceeds to witness the execution.
That's nice. Now you've given so many points in that, and you're right. So for you to get marks, break them down. The first one, it's the duty of the charge's advocate to approve of the charge. So when the charge comes, the charge's advocate has to verify, just check the terms and everything. Second role, as you've rightly put, advise the charges. When you enter into a charge, there are so many things that need to be advised, that the charges need to be advised on. One of them is the effect of Section 90 of the Land Act. What is Section 90 of the Land Act? Section 90 of the Land Act is on the remedies of the bank, or the remedies of a chargee. So they have to explain to the chargers that if you enter into this transaction, the bank has these powers. The bank has the power to sell. The bank has the statutory power of sale. The bank has the power to enter into your premises to do what? Enter into possession and take it. The bank has the right to lease or sublease the premises. The bank has the right to sue you, the charger, for defaulting. So you have to explain all those things. After that, what other duties are there? Remember, we talked about the letter of offer. It's part of the charger's advocates to advise them on the contents of the letter of offer before the chargee executes and enters into such a transaction. Now, what other remedies? Not remedies. What other duties are there? Talk about issues to do with professional undertaking. So, typically, before a bank will give out. Before a bank will give out the sums of money, you have to ensure that a charge has indeed been registered. So you cannot just go to the bank and then say, I will register this interest tomorrow. Please give me what? Please give me the finances for this. So issues to do with professional undertakings will arise. So it's part of the charge's advocate to ensure that the undertaking that has been given by the lenders, the undertaking that they've been given by the charge's advocate to ensure that the title will not be used in any other manner other than for the transaction. So obtaining a professional undertaking that is to the terms and conditions that are favorable to the charger. That's another duty of the charger's advocates. That's one, to ensure that the title documents are not used for any other purpose other than for the registration of a charge. Another one will be that the financiers advocate, so the bank, will give a professional undertaking whereby they will pay the amounts of money upon registration of the charge. So it's part of the charger's advocates to ensure that the professional undertaking is to the form and satisfaction of the charger. So what else will happen here? Issues to do with consents. You remember we talked about obtaining a consent from the first charger. Who will do so? It's the charger. So the charger's advocate will obtain all the consents that are necessary. And I think we've exhausted all the roles of the. Okay, we haven't exhausted. There are so many functions and roles of the charger, advocates for the charger in this transaction. But to sum it up, ensuring that the professional undertakings that are obtained from the financiers advocates or from the chargee are to the form and satisfaction of the charger. Advising the charger on the transaction they're entering into. So this will entail advising the charger when they're entering or concluding the loan agreement, advising the charger on the form and effect of a charge instrument, advising the charger on the implications of Section 90 of the Land Act and the remedies of the charger. Under Section 90, exercising statutory power of sale, appointing a receiver, entering into the land and taking possession, and so forth. What else have we mentioned? Obtaining all the necessary consents available in that transaction, approving the charge, verifying the contents of the charge, and so forth. So that's it. And you're done with your 4 marks. So that's 4. You have your 10 marks already in the exam. And they've never missed to bring a question to do with charges. So we move on to the next one. B. If you have a question, just an
I have a question.
Okay, please go on.
In this case, the charger usually pays the stamp duty, but the money is supposed to be provided by the borrower. Can you twist that into a role of the charger's advocate?
Paying of the stamp duty?
No, giving the money now to the bank to pay, because the bank pays, but the money to pay for the stamp duty is obtained from the borrower.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting the point. So will you fix it? Yeah, you can put it in the essence that it's the duty for the borrower, okay, the advocates for the charger to obtain the funds that are necessary for payment of stamp duty. So it's for them, it's the borrower or the charger who obtains these funds for the payment of stamp duty. So typically what happens is, even if the charge is being created in favor of the bank, stamp duty in essence is usually deducted from the amount that is going to be advanced to the charger. So what will happen is, in the charge, not even the charges, in the loan agreement, there will be a provision to the effect that any sums needed or required for the registration and the perfection of the security or for the creation of a charge will be deducted from the charger. So it's the charger's duty, as you rightly put, to obtain the funds from the bank for payment of stamp duty. So what happens is, if the bank is going to give you a sum of 2 million, part of it will go into paying for legal fees for the bank's advocates. The bank's advocates are the one who prepare this charge and all. Legal fees, stamp duty and everything. That's all going to be for that's all going to be deducted from the charge. So you can add it as a role. Obtaining funds for payment of stamp duty. Obtaining funds for payment of the stamp duty. So that's a role, yes.
Okay, one more question. There's this duty we used to rely on during the discussion, the reading for orals, the one about conflict of interest. Would you advise that it's included, or do you just focus on the substantive process related ones?
No, include it. You see, it said discuss your role. They haven't limited it to list 5 roles, list 4 roles. No, start with your strongest points, finish with those now. Ensure there's no conflict of interest, finish with those. That's what I did in my exam. I started with the strong points, I finished with the weak, with not even the weak, but the ones that I know aren't that direct to the transaction. So yeah, and then you can even give your caseload there. Kaplan, King William Mills versus Kaplan and Stratton, because in that transaction it was a charge that was being created and conflict of interest arose. So yes, it's pertinent as an advocate to ensure that there is no conflict of interest. Yes, add it. It's a good answer. Add it to your list. Start with the strong ones, add the rest. So, hi, we move on to the next question, unless there is anyone who wants to ask a question.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned something to do with consent. So my question is, are we getting consent from the first bank? Is it the first chargee, or where are you getting consent from? Where is the consent arising from? Just
okay, there are 2 types of consent. Okay, there are 2 types of consent in this transaction. You've talked about spousal consent. Yes. Now, spousal consent is to be obtained where the property is matrimonial property. That's one. The other one is consent from the first chargee. Those are the 2 types of consent. Consent from the first chargee, consent from spousal consent. Let me open it for you. Here. Regulation 69 of Legal Notice number 278. The consent for a second or subsequent charge under Section 57.2 shall be in Form LRA 55. So 57.2, it's 57.2 of the Land Registration Act. Here it is. Where a second or subsequent charge is to be created, the consent of the first chargee shall be obtained before the second or subsequent charge is created. So this is the consent we're talking about. Consent from the first chargee. So in this question here, there was NCN Bank. Before the charge is registered, another charge, a second charge is registered in favor of KCK Bank, the charger has to obtain the consent of the first chargee, which is NCN Bank. That is one consent. The other consent that will arise, and this is something that borrowers or chargers usually rely on when they want to dispute the charge's power of sale, is they will bring a spouse, and the spouse will be like, I didn't give my consent for this property to be charged. Why are you going to exercise your power of sale right now? So it's important as part of due diligence and as part of the role of the advocates for the chargee to ensure that before the charge is registered, the consent, the spousal consent, in case it's matrimonial property, is obtained. So there are 2 consents, consent from the first chargee and there's consent, spousal consent, if it's matrimonial property. Is that fine?
Yes.
To clarify.
Yes.
One last question.
Clarify something.
Okay, let her ask the last question, then now you can clarify.
Yeah, okay, thank you so long. So I was asking lastly, now that we need to get consent from the first chargee, is it a guarantee? Is it like the right of the charger to get consent from the first chargee? Is it a guaranteed right?
Okay, that's a good question. No, it's not a guaranteed right. They may refuse. It's not a guaranteed right. They may refuse.
So is there a remedy for Once they refuse, it's just you leave it at that.
Yeah, but see, the remedy is, the order of the concept of priority of charges. So in essence, it won't be, how can I put it? It won't be, it isn't hard for the bank to remove it because they're already protected. Because you see, there is priority of charges. For NCN, that charge ranks in priority to KCK. If the borrower, if Mr. and Mrs. Baraka default, KCK won't go automatically and just exercise the statutory power of sale law. What will happen is NCN will first exercise its statutory power of sale because it has priority. After it exercises, then KCK can now come to claim under it. So in essence, the bank wouldn't refuse to charge because part of the due diligence of the advocates is to ensure that they are protected. And in the charge instrument, we will see provisions saying that the security ranks higher. So in as much as it's not a guaranteed right, the bank can refuse, the first charge can refuse to give consent for a second or subsequent charge. Typically, they are protected if they give that consent because their charge ranks prior to any others. That's under section 56, 57, I think. I think it's section 57, priority, and it's usually noted in the register. That's fine. Yes?
So long to allow me.
Okay, please go on.
Sorry to take you back. I just want to know, in the first question, to what extent did you answer the question? I joined slightly late. You had already discussed the first question. I just want to know the extent that I'll probably answer the question to try avoid being verbose.
Oh, part number A1.
Yes.
Oh, it's in an exam setting, I will say that they're entering into a second or subsequent charge and then give the legal provision for it, section 57. So it's just saying second or subsequent charge, section 57, and just talking in brief about section 57. So you have a transaction where there was a first charge, there was a first charge, and the borrowers here, Mr. and Mrs. Baraka, want to create another charge for the advancement of facilities of 8 million. So that's how you leave it at that. Second subsequent charge, put in section 57 of the Land Registration Act, and you can talk about also issues to do with priority and ranking. In brief, just to exhaust. So my strategy when writing examination answers is start with the strongest points, and my strongest points are: one, the transaction is a second or subsequent charge. The legal provision for it is section 56, section 57 of the Land Registration Act. You've answered the question. Now, down there, just explain it in brief. Explain in brief. And when I talk about explaining in brief, I'm talking about explaining section 57 in brief, in just one line, and you're done with the question.
Okay, thank you.
So for conveyancing, go straight to the point. Go straight to the point.
Yes.
Discussing the steps, list the steps. Yes? Go on.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to clarify something about the concept. You mentioned that there are two consent, that is spousal consent and also the consent from the first bank. And then I was wondering whether
it's matrimonial property. If it's matrimonial,
yes,
only for matrimonial property.
Yes, I was wondering whether there will be need for a land control board consent in such a scenario.
Yes, you need a land control board consent if it's agricultural land. But in this question, Nairobi block now, it's not. It is actually in a municipality. So for agricultural land, you need an LCB consent to charge. That is under section 3, read with section 6 of the Land Control Act. Because if you don't obtain, the transaction is what? Transaction is void. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. So if in the question you see it's agricultural land, then no, you have to obtain the LCB consent to charge. Let me just open it. Here, what is agricultural land? Land that is not within a municipality or a township. Okay, so if Nairobi block, that's a municipality. If it's outside that municipality, you obtain the consent of the land control board. So section here, sorry, section 6. Section 2 read section 6. So section 2, each of the following transaction, for all these transactions, you need to obtain the consent of the land control board. A sale, transfer, mortgage, exchange, partition. So previously they used to use the word mortgage and so what they're talking about is charge. If you're obtaining or if you're creating a charge on an agricultural piece of land, then you need to obtain the consent of the land control board. That's a very good observation. But in this transaction, it wouldn't arise because this property is not agricultural, it's within a municipality. Okay. Is that fine? Sorry, I couldn't see you. Okay, yeah, that's fine. So let's move to the next question. Mr. and Mrs. Baraka have defaulted. The charge have exercised its power of sale. What action should the charge take before exercising such power of sale? So what they're asking is, and I want somebody to attempt this. What are the timelines? In essence, what are the timelines before a charge can exercise its statutory power of sale? Okay, and since we're revising, there's no need to jump. Let's first start with what are the remedies of a charge? And where do you find the law on this? Someone please attempt. Because today they're asking about power of sale. The next day they will be asking about a totally different remedy. Power of sale is only one remedy. What are the other remedies?
Section 90.
Yes, Section 90 of the Land Act provides for the remedies of the chargee. And there are around, I think five, is it 5 or 6? I think five there. There are 5 remedies of a chargee. Statutory power of sale is one. Leasing the land is 2. Appointing a receiver, that's another one, 3. Suing or instituting an action against the charger, that's 4. And they can also enter into possession of the land, that's 5. Those are the 5 remedies of a chargee. But the question is specific on what actions should the chargee take before exercising a power of sale. So let's start with that. What will happen before a bank exercises its power of sale? So I'll just give you 2 minutes to maybe tell me. Then now I give the answers. What are the timelines? There are specific things that need to be done. What are they?
It's wrong, sir.
I can say that.
Guided by section.
Section 90.
First thing the bank is supposed to do is to serve a notice, which is supposed to be 3 weeks notice, at least 3 weeks notice, where they are the notice is supposed to indicate the amount that is due, and also give conditions as to payment with timelines within which such payment is supposed to be made. And also the notice should indicate the consequences of not meeting the timelines and paying the debt. Yes.
Okay, that's one. There is the 3 weeks. Which one else? You've talked about 3 weeks.
There's the statutory notice, which runs for 90 days.
There's that?
The statutory notice.
How many days?
It runs for 90 days.
Someone has mentioned 90 days. Another one? Any other? Okay, you may have heard of any timelines. Which other timelines have you heard about?
40 days.
Yes, 40 days.
55.
There is 40 days, and then there is
45 days. I think the auctioneer's notice is 45 days.
Sorry. So you mentioned 90 days, 40 days.
And 45 days.
45 days notice. Okay. I think that's about it. So somebody please now give it to me in order. Starting from the first. Which one begins, which one follows, which one follows. And please give statutory provisions for each and every one of them. Anyone, just unmute because I can't even see your hand. If anyone wants to volunteer, I can't see if you've lifted your hand or not, so please.
Sorry, I can attempt, but I'm not very conversant with the provisions.
Okay, please go on.
So I think the first thing is, the first notice is after default of 1 month, the bank is supposed to issue a 2 month notice. And then if the monies are not paid within the 2 months, they issue a 40-day notice. Yeah, allow me to leave it at that first.
Okay. And you've raised another very, very important aspect. There's 2 months and there's 3 months. When do you use the 2 months and when do you use the 3 months? Or is it for the bank to decide?
I'm
there is two.
I'm not sure, but I think the 3 months is where there was a stipulated timeline as to when you should pay. But then the 2 months is where it was open. There was no specific timeline as to when you should have paid the money.
For the 3 months and for the 2 months?
For the 2 months.
For the 2 months. What about for the 3 months?
For the 2 months, it's where it was stated that you should have paid by 18th of December, and then you defaulted. Now that is when you go straight into the statutory notice, 90 days. Yes.
Okay, so let me give you sorry. Okay, let me just go straight. So you've actually given it's a fairly good attempt. So the first thing you need to note is the default has to be continuing for how long? 30 days. So that's the first timeline. Note it down. Yeah. So you see, you cannot default today.
1 month.
And then sorry, yes.
Sononka, according to section 90.
Yes, I'm starting with section 90. Sorry, go on.
I'm saying according to section 90, the default should be of 1 month. That is
it's
when yes.
Okay, yes, that's very true. So we're starting with section 90. Under section 90, you cannot default today and notice is sent to you. No, the default has to be ongoing for 30 days. Meaning, if you default today, after 30 days, that is when they will serve you the notice. So you've defaulted for a period of 1 month. So that's the first timeline. The next step is sending you a notice. Now, the notice, there are 2 types of notice. There is a 2-month notice and there is a 3-month notice. So, in simple terms, the 2 months notice is if the obligation is not for payment of money. Yeah? If the obligation is for payment of money, so the default, you've defaulted in paying money, you will give a 3-month statutory notice. If it's an obligation that doesn't involve any payment of money, you give a 2 months notice. Is that clear? That's the difference between the 2 months notice and the 3 months notice. Up to there. So you've defaulted for 30 days. The next step is the bank gives you a notice, a 90-day notice or a 60-day notice. So for 2 months or for 3 months. Is that clear? 3 months if the obligation is for payment of money. 2 months if the obligation is not for, or is for non-payment of money. Is not for, it doesn't consist of non-payment of money. Is that clear? Somebody just say yes so that I go on.
Yes.
That's clear.
Yes.
Okay. So after the 3 months notice has been given, what is the next timeline? If it's for statutory power of sale, you jump all the way to section what? Section 96. After the 3 months notice has expired, we jump all the way to section 96. And 96 talks about how many days? A 40 days statutory notice. So what's the process? You've been in default for 30 days. You are served. Okay, in this circumstance, it's defaulting for payment of money. You are given a 3 month statutory notice. After you've been given a 3 month statutory notice under section 90, you've continued, you've not paid, you've not honored your payment obligations. The next step is the chargee will send you what? A 40-day statutory notice. Then after the chargee has sent you the 40-day statutory notice, the last one now is usually the 45 days one. Now, somebody tell me, where do I get the 45 days notice? Which law do I get the 45 days statutory notice? Under which law?
I think the auctioneer
Act, yes. So before the auctioneers go on ahead and sell your property, they have to give you a notice, and the notice is for 45 days. Now, the specific law is the auctioneers, the rules. Okay, never Google statutes, go to just to the long route, auctioneers. Now it's the rules. Now it's rule 15B. Let me just check and confirm so that you have the answers to it. Rule 15, let's go to rule 15. Yeah, 15D, immovable property. So upon receipt of a warrant or letter of instruction, the auctioneer shall, in the case of immovable property, give in writing to the owner of the property a notice of not less than 45 days within which the owner may redeem the property. So it's 45 days. 45 days. Now the timelines haven't ended. After the 45 days expire, they cannot just go on ahead and sell the property immediately. They have to advertise it in the newspaper. And after advertising it in the newspaper, they have to wait for what? For 14 days to lapse. So they will sell it on the 15th day after advertisement. So in summary, let's recap. We start with section 90. Section 90 provides that you have to be in default for a period of 30 days. After that, they will give you a statutory notice. There's a 2 months and there's a 3 month notice. 3 months is if it's for payment of money obligations. 2 months for if it doesn't consist of any payment of money. That's section 90 still. So in this circumstance, the next step will be giving a statutory notice, a 3 month statutory notice. Forward, after the 3 month statutory notice has been given, the next step is under section 96. You're given a 40 days statutory notice of sale. Power, the statutory notice of sale under section 96. It's 40 days. After that, you are now given the auctioneer's notice. Under Rule 15D of the auctioneer's rules, a 45 days notice by the auctioneers. After that, 14 days for advertisement of your property, and they will proceed to sell it on the 15th day. So cumulatively, there is, once you default, the timelines are 30 plus 90 plus 40 plus 45 plus 14. How many are those? 12, 16, 20, around 219 days, roughly. So that's the provision for it.
So
I hope it's clear. Yes.
say 14. Where did 14 come from?
14. Okay, sorry. 14 is after the auctioneers have given you 45 days notice, they cannot sell the land after the 45 days notice have expired. They first have to advertise it. The 14 days is under Rule 15E here. On the expiry of this 45 days notice, the property will be sold 14 days after the newspaper advertisement. So they will sell it on the 15th day. Is that clear? Yeah.
Yes. That is clear, but I also have another question.
Please go on.
This on the first notice after default, which has been continuing for I think for some time, then there's a notice that you issue, yeah? The first notice.
Please repeat, come again.
Okay, my question is, there are two notices. There's the 2 months notice and there's the 3 months notice. So I'm not quite getting the difference between the two. So maybe if you could repeat.
Repeat, okay, no problem. Let me just open it. Section 90. Let me just open it for you. Section 90 of the Land Act. 90 Land Act. Now, when I was beginning pupillage, one of my seniors wanted to test my knowledge of this, and they asked me, what are the timelines? So I started and gave them all the timelines. So for them, they only know about 90, and 96. So they know about the 90 days and the 40 days and so forth. They didn't know about the one that's hidden. So it's really important when you're reading the law to ensure that you read everything in depth. So I gave him the entire timeline, and he was like, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" Yes, I'm sure. Open the act, and funny enough, it was there. So here it is, Section 92. If the charger is in default of any obligation, fails to pay interest or any other periodic payment, or any part thereof, any charge or a performance or observation of any covenant express or implied, and continues to be in default for 1 month. The 1 month that I was talking about comes from this. That's the 1 month. Now, the difference between the 2 months and the 3 months is based on this. Here. You can hear it, yeah? You can see it. So if the default consists of the non-payment of money, the notice you're going to be given is for 3 months. If the default consists of the failure to perform or observe any covenant, if the default consists of a failure to perform, or observe any covenant expressed or implied in the charge, then you're given a 2 months notice. So in essence, don't think of a charge as typically just to secure the sum of money or a certain sum of money or any money that is advanced to you. A charge can be used for performance or observation of a covenant or express or implied or something. So it's not necessarily for money. It can be used for, let's say you promise something or you promise to do something. It can be secured under this. Yeah? So if the default is because of payment money, then you're given a 3 months notice. If it's for anything else, it's not for money. Let's say you are told to do something, or you said you will do something, or you will perform an obligation, and you fail to perform that obligation, you're not going to be given 3 months, you're going to be given a 2 months notice. Is that fine? Is that clear now?
Yes, thank you.
So that's the law under it, Section 92, B and C. That's the difference. For payment of monetary obligations, 3 months. If it doesn't involve anything to do with money, it's maybe an observation or performance of a covenant or so, it's a 2 months notice that you're given. That's fine, yes? Okay, now let's go on.
Clarification.
You mentioned at some point 40 days.
I mentioned 40 days, yes?
What is the 40 days for?
So the 40 days is for the statutory notice of sale. So remember, the 90 days is provided for under Section 90. This is after you've defaulted. Depending on this, you can be given a 3 months notice or a 2 months notice. So after the 3 months notice, you have still, the default is ongoing. If after 3 months the default is ongoing, then the charger decides to exercise their statutory power of sale under Section 90E. We'll now move on to Section 96, which is specifically on the charges power of sale. They're talking about the statutory power of sale. So after the lapse of the 90 months that has been given here under Section 96, it's saying where charger is in default and the expiry of the 90 days under Section 90 has happened, then the chargee shall serve on the charger a notice, another notice. Now, this is the notice that he will go on ahead and sell the piece of land. The initial notice wasn't a notice saying that I will sell. The 90 days notice was saying that, you are in default. You are in default. Now, this one is saying, I am proceeding to sell this land. Now, this is known as a statutory notice of sale. The chargee will serve a notice of sale, and the timeline is 40 days. You're going to be given 40 days. So it's a statutory notice of sale for 40 days. So after 40 days, that is when they will sell the piece of land.
Okay.
So is that fine?
Yes.
You've all understood the timelines, and this is a question. This is a very common question, and I don't know if you've covered charges, but you will come and do what? And interact with this. So what actions should the chargee take before exercising the power? That's the process. That's what the chargee needs to do. 5 marks, and you move out of that question. Now the next question is, what are the duties of a chargee exercising the statutory power of sale? Any attempt? Duties of a chargee exercising the statutory power of sale.
We have duty of care.
The high duty of care, yes.
Duty of care owned.
Mm-hmm.
Owned to the charge or guarantor. Any charge that is under this. If there's any subsequent charge that is provided, and I think it's Section 97(1) of the Land Act.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Then the chargee owes the duty to the chargee to obtain the best price, not more than 25% below the market price.
Yes.
And there's that the property must be valued prior to the sale. That is, there must be the land the subject land should be valued by a licensed valuer. Then there is also Section 99 of the Land Act also confers protection on the purchaser if there has been any irregularities in the sale. He can also claim damages against the person executing the power. Then there's also the chargee also has the right to sell upon the court order. I think that's it from my end.
Yeah, you've perfectly answered it. Section 97 of the Land Act. Duties of a chargee when exercising the power of sale. The answer is under Section 97. It just encompasses what is talked about, the duty to obtain the best price possible. It's a duty. Duty to obtain the best price possible. Duty to ensure a forced sale valuation is undertaken by a valuer. Duty to sell the property. You cannot sell the property 25% below the market value. So let's say, for instance, the property is $1 million. You can't sell the property for what? Less than what?
Less than 750,000.
Exactly. Less than 750,000. Yes, 750. You can't sell it for less than 750. What else? Yeah, I think that's it. That's it. They just wanted to talk about section 97. That's how easy a conveyancing paper is. That's question 1. You have your 20 out of 20 marks. So obviously you can't get all the 20 marks, but you will get at least out of 20, 18 out of 20, and you're good to go. So, see, that's fine. Question 1, I think we've covered charges comprehensively. I've showed you where to get the law from, where to get the understanding from, and everything is in order. So, for you to perfect charges, read section 56 of the Land Registration Act. Read section 57 of the Land Registration Act. Read section 82, I think 82 is on tacking, 83 consolidation, all the way to section 97 of the Land Act. And finally, for the process, read regulation, read 60 what? We had opened it. Regulation 60, 66, 67 of legal notice number 278. And with that, you have comprehensively covered everything to do with charges. Yes, 67 or 60, such from 67. Read 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, all the way to 75. And if you read that, it can take you only how many minutes? That's only 20 minutes of your reading time. And you've covered charges. And be assured you will get a question on charges in your paper. So let's go to question 2 now.
Solonka, kindly repeat the regulation you've mentioned.
Okay, the specific regulation is regulation 67 all the way to regulation 75 of legal notice number 278 of 2017. This one here. If you have difficulty stressing them, you can just hit me up. I'll send it to you. And you're done with charges. You don't even need to attend classes on charges because it's self-explanatory and you've understood and you will easily get everything and score the marks with regards to charges. Okay, now away from that, let's go to question 2. Somebody kindly read for me question 2.
Zawadi owns property. She has been approached by Joel and Jack, who are interested in the premises. Jack wants to use the property for a period of 5 years. He wants his interest registered against Zawadi's title. On the other hand, Joel wants to use the property every Friday to hold parties for his friends. He will pay a sum of 10,000 on the Fridays he uses the premises. The first question is, advise Zawadi on the 2 agreements Jack and Joel wish to get into.
Sorry, I was talking and I was muted. Just go on reading 2 and 3, and then we'll interrogate each one of them specifically.
Okay. 2. Zawadi opts for the first agreement between him and Jack. What will you take to ensure the agreement is legally binding? Then the third one is, what would be the effect of the non-registration of the agreement between Jack and Zawadi?
Okay. No, that's fine. So let's begin. Advise Zawadi on the 2 agreements Jack and Joel wish to get into. Somebody please attempt. So there are 2 transactions. Zawadi owns the property. Joel and Jack approach Zawadi. Zawadi wants to use the property for a period of 5 years. But Joel wants to use it.
Can I make an attempt?
Yes, please go on. Please go on.
I think for the two agreements.
I can't hear you. You're breaking. Or is it?
My network.
Oh, it's okay. And you can go on again. There's Zawadi and Joel and Zawadi and Jack. Please go on.
Okay, Zawadi and Jack. Zawadi and Joel would be, I think, a license.
Zawadi and Jack is
a lease.
Okay.
And then Zawadi and Joel would be like a license, because I mean, essentially he just needs the permission to use the premises on particular days.
Yeah, that's the answer. So the two agreements is for Zawadi and Jack, that's a lease. Then for Zawadi and Joel, that's a license. Now the question is 4 marks. How will you now ensure you get your 4 marks? So you've started by straight to the point, laying out and saying that between Zawadi and Jack, that's a lease. Zawadi and Joel, that's a license. Now, moving forward, how do you ensure you get all the 4 marks? First, you go on ahead and start defining. What is a lease? You start defining what is a lease. Yes?
I have a question before you do.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is there a catch on where the 5 years are at? Because me, I thought it was something like a control tenancy, or is it also a lease?
Now, for me, that would be a lease and a license. Now, on control tenancies, please explain in terms of the land that for tenancies and all. Please explain. On control tenancies, the catch on the 5 years.
Okay, let me assist. Control tenancy is when you are letting out maybe for a shop.
Okay, yes.
Or
Landlord.
premises, yeah. So 5 years, a period of 5 years maximum.
For a period of 5 years. But then,
yeah,
does
control
it apply
tenants.
Under the Act? The Act.
Sorry?
Under the Act under the Act of Parliament, the what? The land, something, tenancies, it has a very long name.
Or shops and something tenancies.
Shops.
Yeah, it's that one. Yeah.
That one, the land.
So
it's the land. It's landlord and tenant something. Landlord and tenant.
Shops, hotels, and catering establishments.
Okay. Now exactly, that is true. But now, for you now to distinguish between the application of that act in this kind of circumstance is for that landlord and tenant, the one that you've just mentioned, it's usually very long. Landlord and tenant selling shops, hotels, and catering something. It's for specific types of, what can I say, entities, for lack of a better word. It's either for shops, for hotels, or for catering establishments. It doesn't apply like blanketly to any term that is under the period of 5 years. No, it's for specific types of transactions under specific types of entities, as I repeat, for lack of a better term. It's only applicable where you talk about a shop, about a hotel, or a catering establishment, if you go check the Act. So that's why it wouldn't apply in this circumstance, because in this, they're talking about Zawadi owns property in Mombasa. She has been approached by Joel and Jack in the premises. Jack wants to use the product for 5 years. He wants. There's no specification on this specifically that it's a tenancy for a shop, hotel, or a catering establishment. They're just talking about property. It may be, let's say, it's a piece of land, or maybe it's a beach property or something. So the one for 5 years under the Landlord and Tenants, the Act in full, wouldn't be applicable because, in my opinion, this question doesn't talk about this specific establishment. to it, a catering establishment, a hotel, or a shop. Sawa. Is that fine? Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Now, going back to the question,
So long,
we were
just to
talking about.
clarify. Sorry. Are we assuming that they're coming separately? Because at first I would have thought that the one for Joel would be a sublease, or are they separate agreements that they want separate agreements, or will Joel now be asking for the permission from Jack?
That's a very important question. It's a good one. Now, from the reading of the question, it's Zawadi and Jack, and who else? Zawadi and Joel. If the question was saying Zawadi and Jack, and then Jack and Joel, then there you will bring out the element of a sublease, because a sublease happens where there's a head lease. So let's say Zawadi has already leased the land to Jack. Then Joel comes to Jack and says, okay, let me lease for a shorter duration, let's say for 2 years. Zawadi has given Jack for 5 years. Then Joel is like, I want to use this maybe for a certain duration of time for these times and all. Then between Jack and Joel, that is a sublease. But in this question, they're saying Zawadi and Jack, and then there's Zawadi and Joel. So Zawadi owns property. Jack wants to use the property for a period of 5 years. On the other hand, Joel wants to use the property every Friday to hold parties for his friends. So you see, the argument is between Zawadi and Joel, Zawadi and Jack. And you know, okay, we're going back now to defining a lease. There is an element of exclusive ownership. If Zawadi decides to lease the land to Jack, Zawadi cannot go on ahead, and then once they've leased it to Jack, the exclusive possession, ownership arises. So a sublease will only happen between Jack and Joel. Jack has been leased that property by Zawadi. But if it's between Zawadi and Joel, Zawadi and Jack, those are two different transactions. So between Zawadi and Jack, it will be a lease, then Zawadi and Joel, it will be a license. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
So long, if I may.
Yes.
What about the issue? What about the issue of fractional title and timeshare?
No, fractional title and timeshare. So this one arises where, let's say, for instance, okay, let's talk about this. The question would, for the issue of fractional or timeshare to have arisen, it will happen, let's say, where Joel and Jack, they decide, okay, this property for the first 3 months, okay, for the first 6 months, Joel will be owning it. For the remaining 6 months, who else will be who Joel will be leasing it. That's when fractional or timeshare would arise in that scenario or that circumstance. But in this circumstance, they are saying Jack wants the property for 5 years, but Joel wants to use it every day, every Friday, to hold parties for his friend. So here, they don't want to split the timelines. Jack wants to use this property exclusively to him for 5 years. Joel wants to use it exclusively on Friday only. So these are two separate transactions. It's like there's even a presumption that Jack and Joel don't know each other. So you have Zawadi just seated there and she has a property, and each one of them approaches her with different offers. Jack wants the property exclusively for 5 years. Joel wants it only for Fridays to hold parties. Now, fractional ownership would apply where, let's say, for a certain duration of time, for fractional or timeshare for a certain duration of time, this property will be owned by Joel, maybe for the first 6 months, or maybe for 3 months, or during this certain time frame, and then the other time frame, it will be owned by Jack, and so forth. So in this circumstance, fractional and timeshare will arise.
Solonka.
Yes, please go. Yes, I can.
I'm a bit stuck on the issue of controlled tenancies because I'm looking at the question again and it says Jack wants to use the property. For me, the word to underscore there is use, and when you look at the landlord tenant, you know, could we say that it's being used? Maybe they want to use it for, you know, the purposes of shops, hotels, or the catering establishment. And on the other hand, I'm thinking, what was the intention of this examiner while putting 5 years here? I mean, to my mind, the examiner is testing something here, and I'm persuaded to think he's testing whether the candidate knows something about controlled tenancies, because controlled tenancies, one of the key characteristics is that it should not be, exceed 5 years. So I don't know what you'd say about that.
Okay, let's just open, because in my understanding, I don't know which section is it 2, 3, or 4 there. Let's see. So this is the question you've asked.
Section 2.
You have it. Okay, please go on ahead and read. Please read.
Okay, section 2 of the Section 2 of the Landlords and Tenants, Shops, Hotels, and Catering Establishments, Cap 301, defines a controlled tenancy as a tenancy of a shop, hotel, or catering which has not been reduced into writing, or in the event that it has been reduced into writing and which is for a period not exceeding 5 years, or contains a provision for termination other than for breach of covenant within 5 years from the commencement thereof, or relates the premise of a class specified by notice in the Gazette by reference to rent paid or rateable value entered in Valuations for Rating Act, classes of shops, hotels, or catering establishment tenancies of which shall be regarded as controlled tenancies regardless of the form or period of such tenancies. Okay, the exception to this provision is that there shall be a controlled tenancy where the government, community, or local authorities are party. So I think if it is reduced into writing, it's for a period of 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And contains a provision.
Now, going back to the question that was initially asked, what if these people want to use it as a hotel or a shop? That's very different, because under this act, they're presuming that property, it's not like whoever is coming wants to use it. No, it's already a shop, it's already a hotel, or it's already a catering establishment. That is when it will fall under a controlled tenancy. Not if it's something that the other party now will come to use it, maybe as a shop or a hotel or a catering establishment.
So Solonka, sorry, if maybe if it was a lease, okay, I don't think it makes sense, but I don't think it makes sense by the way you're saying. So maybe it was just a lease, someone can decide to convert it into a controlled tenancy. I don't think if it can operate like that though. Just a normal lease, maybe the way you said.
No, what I was saying is, okay, let me explain it again here.
Solonka, I would wish to jump in.
Okay, please go on, jump in.
I think we could be guided by line 3 of the question, where we are told that he wants his interest registered against Zawadi's title, and the question is, are controlled tenancies registered now that we know leases are registered?
That's a very good question. Also, another question would be, are licenses registered also?
So then I think from guidance, then and a license and not controlled tenants.
I don't actually make from the question. Yeah, it makes sense. Now, it makes sense. Now, back to the question that I was asked by, I don't know if it's Alo. A catering establishment, a sublease and a controlled tenancy. Controlled tenancy. You see, this is something else that you need to note. This line here, he will pay a sum of Kenya shillings 10,000 on the Fridays he uses the premises. On the Fridays he uses the premises. He'll only be paying whenever he uses the premises. Can a tenancy happen in such a transaction? Can there be a tenancy or a controlled tenancy in such a transaction? You see, Joel wants to enter into an informal arrangement. He wants to hold parties every Friday, but he will only pay it for the days he uses, not every day, for the days he uses the premises. Going back to Alo. Are you getting my catch over there?
Sorry, I was looking at the tenants. Can you repeat?
The question is saying that.
So long.
Sorry, okay. The question is saying that Joel wants to use the property every Friday to hold premises parties for his friends. He will pay a sum of Kenya shillings 10,000 in the Fridays he uses the premises. And I think maybe the best way to approach this question is first let's distinguish between a lease, a license, and then we will bring in the issues of controlled tenancies here for you guys. Let's distinguish and then we see what fits to the question. Okay.
So long. As we distinguish, we also look at if it's a license. We see if it's the type of a license it is, if it's a bare license or a contractual, and then if it's a lease, we also look at if it is a. I think the types of leases, if it's for a fixed period or a periodic one.
No, short term, long term, periodic tenancies and so on. Yeah, and that's section. Okay, that's fine. No, in 5 minutes, let's just distinguish and we'll move fast on this. You can list. Okay, let me just list them for purposes of moving fast. So there's a lease. So a lease, there's this locus classicus case law that talks about a lease that is also complemented by the various definitions under the Land Act. You can check from section 56 moving forward. But this case, you will use it anyway, and that is Street versus Mountford. It explained very well what is a lease and the various essentials of a lease. Now, for a lease, you have various ingredients in a lease. One, there's exclusive possession. Once you lease it, this person has exclusive possession to use it. There is duration. Exclusive possession for a certain period of time. Okay. And then there is, what else? There is now the parties. Okay, there's usually parties, but I think a defined area. And then now we can bring in the parties. So essentially we have like four essentials or four elements of a lease. You have a defined area or defined premises. You have a defined time frame or defined duration, and you have exclusive possession. Those are the main ones. Then you can bring in issues to do with the parties. That's a lease. Any transaction in land that is for a defined premise for a certain duration of time, be it 5 years, 10 years, over 21 years for long-term leases, that's a lease. in essence. That transaction is a lease. Okay. We're done with leases. Let's go to licenses. Now, a license is just, but in simple terms, it's a permission. It's permission that is granted to someone to use property. It's like a permission. And we can give the perfect example on, we used to be given this, we were given this in Compass. Let's say for instance, parking. Yeah, when you go to park in town and you pay, let's say, and you pay maybe for town parking. You have permission. You have a license to pay for that specific area. That's, yeah, you can think of it as a license. It's just a permission. Some of the distinctions between a lease and a license are: one, a lease gives you exclusive possession. And in a lease, there are various rights. One of the colleagues talked about a sublease. Yeah. So in a lease, you can do, for instance, if the lease agreement provides for you, you can sublease. You can assign rights over that lease. You can even transfer that lease. But that won't happen when it comes to a license. You cannot transfer or assign a license. A lease is issues with possession and so forth. But those rights are not accessible when it comes to licenses. And another important one, and the most important one, is the issues to do with revocation. A license can be easily revoked, whereas a lease cannot be easily revoked. You have to wait for the duration of time. If you revoke a lease before the time frame has ended, those are grounds for breach of a contract in the first place, and so forth. So if a lease, for instance, the interest is registered, if it's registered, then the duration of time has to end for it, or for the validity of that lease to end. Now that's it to do with leases, and that's it to do with licenses. Now let's talk about controlled tenancies. Controlled tenancies under that act, landlord and tenant shops and something, is for specific types of transactions, which involve tenancies in shops, which involve tenancies in hotels, which involves tenancies in controlled tenancies that are for, you mentioned 5 years or less, hasn't been reduced in writing, and so forth. So that's a controlled tenancy. So we have 3 different answers. So for me, for the transaction between these 2 people is a lease and a license. So the lease, because Jack wants to use a property for a period of 5 years. So one, that property is defined. There's a defined area for that property. So let's say it's 10 acres. They want to use it for how many years? 5 years. That's defined premises. That's defined premises and defined time. And lastly, if he wants to use it for a period of 5 years, Jack, he wants exclusive possession over that piece of property. So I think we would agree and assume between Zawadi and Jack, not assume, we would agree. I think here we're in agreement. Between Zawadi and Jack, this transaction here is a lease. Between Zawadi and Jack, is anybody disputing that one? Between Zawadi and Jack? He wants to use it for a period of 5 years. Why did they put 5 years there? Because it's not forever, it's not infinite. It's because a crucial element of a lease is defined time. You have a lease for a defined time. And this defined time is how many years? 5 years. If you get it for 5 years, this property in Mombasa, there's defined premises, that specific property. If it's 2 acres, he wants the entire 2 acres for 5 years. There's the defined time, there's the defined premises by that property, and lastly, he wants it to the exclusion of others. Which is a what? Which is defined, which is exclusive possession in essence. So between Zawadi and Jack, who has a contrary opinion on whether it's a lease or maybe something else? Because for me, everything points towards it being a lease. That's why they mentioned 5 years. to show the aspect of defined time. And then there's something else. He wants his interest registered against Zawadi's title. You know, a lease is an interest. Actually, a lease, is it? Do you know a lease is an encumbrance? Let me show you here. Let's start. Let me just show you. These are some of the nitty-gritties that people usually don't pay attention to. Encumbrance section, contents of the property section, contents of the proprietorship, contents of the encumbrance section. Let's see. It's usually written somewhere. Let's see. Encumbrance. Here. What is an encumbrance? Means any charge, any lease, or other interest which adversely affects land or an interest in land. Why does he want to register that interest against Zawadi's title? Because he wants to create, Jack wants to create an encumbrance over it, so that later on, you know, this person, Zawadi, cannot come again and say, I revoked, or I want to go back against our terms and conditions. No, there's an encumbrance that will be registered. There's a lease that will be registered on that piece of property. For how many years? For 5 years. And he will use that property exclusively to himself. Yes. Defined areas for premise, defined time, and there's exclusive possession. Those are the three essential elements of anyway, is that clear? Does that make sense? Can we pass on that? Hello, Auma.
Yes. But
You
I'm still
persuaded now?
conflicted
No,
kidogo.
are you 50-50? Okay,
Yeah,
just
but
the
it's
air.
but it's
Just
fine.
say where. Huh?
It's okay.
And actually,
I
another
think
pointer will be this one.
Mhm.
He wants his interest registered. He wants his interest registered against Zawadi's title.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about a registration of an interest. A lease is an interest.
Yes.
Yeah, you register a lease under
Yeah.
Form LRA. What? There's Form LRA 60, LRA 63. There's Form LRA 64. Let me just open it for you, just to buttress the point, just to show you how leases are registrable interest. LRA 62. LRA 62. Okay, it is. This is a lease. So after they've entered the agreement, Zawadi and Jack will register this instrument, this lease. It will be taken to the land registrar. Being taken to the land registrar, stamp duty will be paid on it because this is 2%, 4% applies this transaction. After you've paid for stamp duty, you've met all the requirements, you lodge an application to the registrar. What? We'll register it. Now, the essentials of a lease, here it is in this instrument. Defined premises. That's there's the term, 5 years. There's what else? Rent, standard premium. That's the. Is it clear? This is an interest that is registered.
Yeah, I think it's clear.
It's clear now, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we've actually answered number one comprehensively. Between Jack and Zawadi, that's the place. Now let's go to Joel and Zawadi about on Fridays. So they want to enter into some sort of arrangement where Zawadi will be giving Joel permission to use this property for holding parties on Fridays. And consideration for that permission is 10,000. And the thing that will guide you to know that this is a lease is because of the nature it holds. Joel won't be using that property every Friday. We'll be using it for the Fridays he wants, and he will be paying 10,000 for those Fridays. So such an arrangement is easily revoked. Sorry. Such an arrangement is easily revoked. His rights are limited, yeah? They can be revoked at any time. And in essence, there's no protection. There's no proper protection he gets, because one day he may come and say, I want to use this property on Friday, and Zawadi will be like, no, today, no, and so forth. But he will only pay for the times that he's using the property on. For relating between the differences of a lease and a license. Okay, for you to read and understand leases and licenses very well, for leases, start reading from section 56 of the Land Act. Also read regulation I just pointed out right now when I was opening for you. This one, read regulation 76. Moving forward, for legal notice number 278, and everything to do with leases, term leases, the short-term leases, and registration of it, so forth. And you'll be good to go. If you read legal notice 278, you're ready to do this conveyancing paper. Now, moving forward, Zawadi opts for the first agreement between him and Jack. So he decides to do a lease. What steps will you take to ensure the agreement is legally binding? Somebody attempt it. What steps will you take to ensure that the agreement is legally binding? So in essence, what they are asking is, here, the essentials of a lease that we talked about. Go on, sorry.
Yes, like the essentials. Probably a contract or an agreement that for it to be legally binding, it must be in writing and it must be executed between the parties.
Exactly. So there has to be a contract that is in writing, well executed by the parties, and the contract has some peculiar elements to it. There are peculiar elements to a lease, which is the contract has to specifically provide for exclusive possession, has to specifically provide for define the areas of the property. The contract has to specifically do what? To define the areas, provide for exclusive possession. Yes.
Rent.
Yes. Rent, that's consideration now. The money, the rent, the premium. Yes. The contract has to provide for. The list is exhaustible. So look at a typical lease transaction. I'm sure some of you rent houses in Rongai, you rent houses in leases. They may just be these short-term tenancies or periodic tenancies, but the gist is the same. There's rent, there's exclusive possession, there's defined areas, there's defined premises. What else? Yeah, the rent has been rightly pointed out, and you're done. And you obtain an interest. You obtain an interest in land. Once you've done that, an interest is obtained. So what steps will you take? One, ensure. The trick up there. Who drafts the lease? Who prepares the lease? Is it the tenant or is it the landlord? Is it the lessor? Is it the lessee?
The landlord, I believe.
Yes, that's it. So he will prepare a lease. Yes, he will prepare the lease. The lessor landlord, he will prepare the lease, send it to the other advocate. After sending it to the other party's advocate, the other advocate will go through it, advise the client, the tenant or the lessee to sign it. But that agreement, there are some core essentials that need to be there. And that's what we've mentioned. Defined promises, defined area, exclusive possession, the premium, the parties, and you're good to go.
Ronka, what about registration?
Now, for registration, yes, you can register a lease, but which types of leases? Okay, to put it in simple terms, is it mandatory for you to register a lease, and which types of leases provide for you for mandatory registration?
Maybe long term.
Yeah, there's long term. Yeah, for long term. For these others, you can register it. You can fail to register it, but registering it does what? Gives you that the upper oomph, like you're more protected if you register it, because as you remember, I pointed out a lease is what? It's an encumbrance. You can check legal notice number 27. Most people don't know about that, but it's an encumbrance. So if you register a lease, if you register your interest, you're more protected than having an agreement. Than just having a simple agreement. So yes, registration gives you that, gives you more protection than not having it registered. So it's safe for you to have it registered. Now let me show it to you this. Let me show so that you explain how to explain it. So this is a lease. 63 is a transfer of lease, and 64 is for long-term leases. So long-term leases for 21 years and more. Okay, if you have a lease for 2 years, for 3 years, for 5 years, for 6 years, up to 20, which instrument from LRA 62. Sawa. You will use 62. 64 long-term leases, 62 any leases. Any leases in between. Okay. And then there's something else. Which type? There's a question I answered and you didn't answer, and you didn't actually. Okay, you mentioned long-term leases. It's mandatory for you to register long-term leases. Yes, it's mandatory. But which types of leases is it not mandatory for you to register? There's a specific type. Which type? Somebody who wants to attempt.
Short-term leases.
Yes, short-term leases.
And periodic leases.
Short-term leases for how long? What's the duration for short-term leases?
2 years or less.
Yes, 2 years. So if you have a lease that's for 2 years and less, then it's not mandatory for you to register it. But if your lease exceeds 2 years, then you have to register it. Okay, so if your lease is for 5, 6, you have to register that lease. But you have to distinguish. There is we can put it into 3 categories. There's a short-term lease, 2 years and less. Then there are these leases that are between 2 years and 21 years. There's that category. And then there's 21 years and more. But for 21 years and more, that's what they refer to as long-term leases. But remember, there's that bracket in between. There's short-term, 2 years and less. Then there's that one in between, 2 to 21. And then above 21, they term it as long-term leases. Okay, you can check. For short-term leases, the section is section 58 of the Land Act. Then read provisions, just going down. 56, 57, 58, read all of them. Let's see if I have the Land Act here. So 56, 57. Actually, yeah, 55, 56, moving forward. So 58 is the one that provides for long-term leases. So a short-term lease is not registrable in land. This is what we're talking about. A short-term lease is a lease made over term 2 years and less. It's made maybe orally or in writing, and it's not registrable interest in land. So the answer to that question, you've covered it. What are the steps? Enter into an agreement. After you've entered into an agreement, you do what? You ensure that the essentials of a lease, the validity, the essentials, the defined area, the defined premises, the exclusive possession, the duration is well laid out in the agreement, and the definition of the parties is properly laid out. The issues to do with the rent is also laid out well, and you will have a validly binding legal agreement. Then, to offer better protection to yourself, because the lease is for 5 years and more, you have to register it so as to offer yourself better protection. Because if it's registered as a lease, your interests are now secured in the register. Your interests are now secured in the register. What do I mean? If, let's say, Joel and Jack enter into a lease and they've registered the lease, Zawadi cannot go on ahead and sell the same property while the lease is subsisting. The lease interest is subsisting on the title because it will be listed as an encumbrance. Typically, it's the same way if, let's say, you've charged a piece of land to a bank and then you want to go sell that land, it will be noted. You know, the purchaser will see, no, there's an encumbrance, there's a charge in this land. The same thing will happen when it comes to a lease. They will see that there's an encumbrance on the lease. Okay, that's 2. We move on to 3. What will be the effect of the non-registration of the agreement under Jack and Zawadi? That's the question of the asking. What is the effect of non-registration? Somebody please tell me. What is the effect? What will happen? We're discussing, we're revising, so don't be afraid of giving answers. Looking for the land out. Actually, I was talking about key. What is the effect? Somebody just please say. I'm actually going to open the answer, so you can just you can give your answers.
Can I try?
Yes, please try.
Yeah, I think in response to that, I would cite the case like the Grosnova case, which provides that where a lease is not registered, then in essence it will be deemed like a contract.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I can remember.
That's actually true. That's the answer. So even if it's not registered, contractual obligations subsist, meaning there are rights to that piece of there are contractual obligations still. So despite non-registration, there will be a valid transaction. So it wouldn't invalidate, like, the lessor won't say, because, we didn't register this lease, it's invalid my land. No. Based on that case law, and I'm trying to look for there's actually a section in the Act. I'm trying to look for, you've said, contractual obligations will still subsist, and the lessee has remedies. Or who else has a contrary answer to that?
Solonka. Can we talk about Section 24 of the Land Registration Act?
Which is actually the section I'm looking at. Yeah, this is interest conferred by registration. The registration to a person as a proprietor shall vest in that property the absolute ownership. The registration as a there's that provision. There's also another one. There's a specific one that I'm looking for that is actually direct on that.
36 to
section.
36.
Yes,
36.
It is 36 too. I was looking for it. I don't know what was that, but thanks so much. 36 2. Nothing in this section shall be construed any unregistered instrument from operating as a contract. So that's it. Effect of registration. Contractual obligations subsist. It will continue operating as a contract. Section 36 2 of the Land Registration Act. So question 1 and 2, you guys are adequately now familiar with that. Question 2, you're comfortable with that before we move on to question 3 and finish up with that. Are you guys comfortable now with that?
Solonka, I have a question. If you check section 3 of the Law of Contracts Act,
yeah.
It provides that no suit shall be brought upon a contract for the disposition of an interest in land unless the contract upon which the suit is founded is in writing, is signed by all parties thereto.
Yes.
What is your take on that section based on the question that you've just handled right now?
Okay. Now, true to your words, Section 3 of the Law of Contract Act provides that you cannot bring an action. Basically, if a transaction or a sale transaction involves the sale of land, or involves pieces of land, or involves land in general, it has to be in writing, properly executed, and all the requirements under Section 3 met. That is a contract. But you see, when you talk about registration, it's totally different. What do you register? You register an instrument. The one that I just pointed out to you guys here. Let me just open it again. Here. This is the instrument that you're registering. So in essence, what this question is saying is Zawadi and Jack have entered into a contract. They've complied. They've registered an agreement under 2. So you know we talked about the agreement under part 2 here. We talked about the agreement, ensuring that the essentials are there, having it properly executed, and so forth. Now you have an agreement, it's valid. But you don't go on ahead and register it. You know, registration is not a requirement under the law, under Section 3 of the Law of Contract Act. It's only a requirement under the Land Registration Act, read together with Legal Notice number 278, Regulation 76. This is what provides for registration. So you lodge this instrument for registration. So part 3 is asking, what if you don't register this instrument? What is the effect? What is the effect of failing to register this instrument? And the effect is simple. The contract will continue to operate. Even if you fail to register this lease in the land registry, the contract will subsist. The contractual obligations will go on despite non-registration of a lease, of this lease.
So Lonka, to add on that, okay, if it's a contract, it's enforceable in court without it being registered.
Yes, it's enforceable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Salonka. Maybe to follow it up immediately after that is now when you're having a contract, what you will be going for are enforcement of equitable rights. But when it is registered, now you have a legal right on that particular lease.
Yeah, you can also argue it in that sense. You can talk about specific performances. On you and you've registered a lease, you can bring out specific performance. No, this person has to continue, and this person be obliged to continue letting this piece of property for the period we had initially agreed contractually. You know, the effect of registration is the same. The effect of registration, now just to make it simpler, is the effect of registration is your interest will be noted in the register. Let's see if we can get a sample title. Let's just look at the sample title deed. So you're seeing this. Let's look at this, for instance, this title. No, it's refusing to open. But I'm presuming you can see my screen, yeah? This is the title. This is the title deed. If the lease, the interest is registered, the interest will appear on the title. In the encumbrance section, at the back page, it will be noted that there is a lease, Zawadi and Jack as an encumbrance, similar to a charge, the way I was explaining it. If you enter into a charge with the bank, the charge will be noted in the title as an encumbrance, meaning any person who comes later on, let's say you've registered a charge in favor of a bank, and then later on, after 2 years, you want to sell the piece of property, you can't, because the property is encumbered, and the other party, the purchaser, similar thing will happen to a lease. You are more protected because it will be noted. Your interest is going to be noted on the register. If you fail to register it, it won't be noted in the register. And there are things that can happen in such a transaction. For instance, if you don't register a charge, somebody can go on ahead and maybe let's say sell the property with a charge, sell the property, and the bank loses its security. Another thing that will happen is, let's say the person goes ahead and obtains another loan from another bank. Yeah. If he obtains another loan from another bank, let's say there is Equity Bank, alipata loan, but the charge wasn't registered. Then they go on ahead and get another loan from KCB Bank. And then KCB Bank registers a charge in their favor on this property. What will happen? KCB's rights will rank prior to Equity's rights. Yeah? And that's dangerous because Equity gave the loan first. KCB issued it later on. Are you getting the element of protection that comes with registration? That's the element of protection that comes with registration. So if you fail to register, there's some essence. In some essence, you will not be adequately protected, but the contract will still subsist. So for a bank, for instance, there's a loan agreement. If you fail, the bank can go on. What they can't do is start exercising, the statutory power of sale leases and so forth. The bank can go on ahead and sue you. It's the same way same thing that will happen to a lease. The person can go sue you, as you rightly pointed out, seek for all those. That's sufficient, yes. Maybe we can do question 3 and then close it up, because I'm seeing we have a few minutes remaining. We can do question 3 and then close it up, if there are no further questions. So I'll just pass through it in a hurry. So your clients, Mr. and Mrs. Riziki, all that land known as LR 18119 in Runda Estate, Nairobi. Recently, several people have visited the property claiming that it has been advertised for sale and making offers to buy it. 1. Discuss the steps you will take to ensure that Mr. and Mrs. Riziki's property is not fraudulently sold. 2. Explain the implications of the actions taken in 1 above the property. 3. Your client decided to sell LR 18. Conducting an official search, it emerges that a court order was registered against the property, barring any dealings on the property. Explain to your clients the effect of the court order on the title. Higher. This is on a specific area of law known as restraints in disposition of land. What's the answer to that? What can Mr. and Mrs. Riziki do to prevent the property from being fraudulently sold? Somebody attempt.
Restrictions.
Yeah. They can register a restriction on that piece of property. Which provision of the law?
Section 76 of the Land Registration Act.
Exactly. So the Land Registration Act. Okay. And that's the substantive bit. Now remember, conveyancing is about what? About procedures. They are saying discuss the steps list. Steps. So how would you go? Remember how I told you how you read for conveyancing? You just come here. The answers are here in the 33-page document that I had you guys to go
Malonga, you're breaking.
read. Legal notice number 278. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
It's perfectly fine now.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the provisions you will mention is, you will start with section 76 of the LRA, Land Registration Act, and complement it with regulation 81 of legal notice number 278. So when I was telling you that there are answers for every conveyancing question, they've asked, discuss the steps, and these are the steps. An application for a restriction under section 76 will be made in form LRA what? 75. Now remember, in conveyancing, it's hard. Okay, it's not hard, it's possible. You can remember these specific forms, but if you can't remember, don't beat yourself up. Just write in the relevant form as per Land Registration General Regulations. Legal notice number 278 of 2017. If you can't remember, but if you can remember them perfectly well, and I'm sure you have this document, it's only 33 pages. If you read it today, tomorrow, okay, today, after 2 days you read again, after 2 days you read again. By the time you do the paper, you will have captured all these forms. You will remember at least the essentials and basic ones. You click to your mind. Leases 62, charges 56, these, and so you will remember. So the steps are, you make an appeal for a restriction under Formulary 75. After that is done, the registrar will issue a notice of intention to register a restriction. Okay. After they issue that, they will register a restriction. And after the restriction is registered, they will do what? They will issue another notice informing the proprietor that a restriction has been placed. I think the question was 4 marks, and I think we've covered it. Yeah, 4 marks. An application for restriction, registrar will issue a notice, registration of the restriction, and then afterwards another notice will be issued indicating that a restriction has been placed on a piece of property.
Solomka?
Yes?
A different approach. I thought we would advise them to lodge a caution.
Okay, that's a good question. Now, what's
yeah,
the difference?
I remember we had a class on the same, and I remember the lecturer saying that restrictions are mostly, you find restrictions mostly in cases of compulsory acquisition.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
so the question would be the book.
Okay, let me open it for you. Okay, let me open the Land Registration Act. Now, there's something you need to remember. A proprietor of a land, I own this land. I cannot register a caution over it because a caution has a class of people who can register it, not the proprietor. There are certain people who can register a caution, not the proprietor is not one of them. Let me open it under section 6.
Solonka,
Yes.
to add on, I think a restriction is best. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I can go on.
Okay, I think a restriction is best because a caution is mostly if you have like an interest in a certain property, maybe someone's property, maybe if you have something like a charge on a property, so you register it as a caution, but restriction will be better restriction will be better for the whole land, so that you're restricting people from maybe for another person being sold off the land. So a restriction is better. A caution is limiting to mostly someone's interest in someone's land.
Yeah. That's true. 3 types. Okay, all these things are called restraints in disposition of land. We have an inhibition, we have a caution, and we have a restriction. An inhibition is usually issued by the court. So it's the court. After a court makes an order, you go to the registrar with the court order, and an inhibition is registered over that piece of property. So inhibition to Matambari, that's the court. Now for a caution, Mary, for a caution, these are the people who can register a caution. A person who claims the right, whether contractual or otherwise, to obtain an interest in any land, sale, or charge capable of creation by an instrument registrable under this act. So let me give an example. There is the purchaser and there's a vendor. Now, the purchaser and the vendor have entered into a contract that they want to, into a sale contract. This land will be sold for this amount of money. There's a sale contract that is undergoing. Then the purchaser hears that the vendor is in the process of wanting to transfer that property to another piece of land. The purchaser will go on and register a caution, because he claims a contractual over that land. He claims. But you see, a proprietor, you read the right is you're not claiming any contractual right in that land, be it release, charge, and so forth, for you to lodge a caution. The other category is a person who is entitled to a license, and the other one is a person who has made an application for a bankruptcy order against the proprietor of the registered land, lease, or charge. So in terms, whenever you see a question and the question is on the proprietor, this is a proprietor, the owner of the land. There are some activities that are going on in his land, and he wants to put a restraint in disposition of that land. He cannot register a caution. What is a restriction? And on the question of compulsory acquisition, I will differ with the lecturer because of this. Restrictions are not restricted acquisition at all. Here it is. For the purposes of compulsory acquisition, that is 1. For the prevention of any fraud or improper dealing, that is 2. Or for any other sufficient cause. So there are 3 things. It can be for compulsory acquisition, It can be to prevent any fraud or improper dealing, and it can be for any sufficient reason that the registrar will deem sufficient for the lodging of a restriction. So in this circumstance, appropriator, in the question, if you see any question, appropriator, the owner of the land cannot register a caution over his own property. Only persons who have a contractual interest or otherwise can do so. The owner of the land can only register a restriction. Is that understood now? Mary, is that fine?
Yeah, I still have 1A, but I get where you're coming from. Maybe I'll just have to read it again and understand.
Oh, it's fine.
I thought
Yeah,
71A means the proprietor of the land.
No.
Like for the part where the person who can register a caution. I thought it means the proprietor.
No. You see, it cannot be the proprietor because the proprietor already has an interest. But here it's saying a person who claims the right to obtain. Okay, just skip this. Skip this in between. A person who claims the right to obtain. The proprietor already has the interest. So he's not obtaining any interest.
All right. Thank you.
That's fine. Yes? So next time, maybe you can raise it up with the lecturer and then see what they think about it. But a caution, it's people who have a claim to obtain an interest in land, whether contractual or otherwise. Okay, let's move beyond Otufunge. So those are the steps. Go read regulation. This is the regulation that I have given our regulation 81, sorry. Regulation 81 has the steps. It's just a 4-step process and you're done. That's the answer. Legal notice 278. So explain the implications of the actions taken in 1 above on the property. What are the implications? The implications? It's simple. There's a restraint disposition of that land, meaning there be any sale, there cannot be any transaction going on over that piece of property until the restriction is removed. So the implications is the restriction will endure for a period of time until the occurrence and so forth. And once or whenever or if the restriction is still in place, there cannot be any transaction happening over that piece of land. It prohibits any dealings over that piece of property. So you just do that and then you explain it further. There you will bring out section 70, 76, 76, 76, 1, 2, okay, 76 2A. And then actually it's 77, notice and defect. An instrument that is inconsistent with the restriction shall not be registered while the restriction is still registered, except by order of the court or the registrar. So it prohibits or restricts any dealings in that piece of land. There cannot be a sale, there cannot be a transfer, there cannot be a charge if the restriction is still subsisting. And then 3, your clients decide to sell LR 18-119. Upon conducting an official search, it emerges that the court order was registered under the property barring any dealings on the property. Explain to your clients the effect of the court order on the title. So they're just repeating themselves. The effect of a caution is there is a restraint in all dealings of that piece of property until the caution, the inhibition is removed. So if you see a court order, automatically it should click that's a caution, an inhibition. Sorry. So the effect of an inhibition is under section 69. So long as an inhibition remains registered, any instrument that is inconsistent with the inhibition shall not be registered. It's just the same thing. Basically, what they're doing is they have restrained all dispositions over that piece of land. There can be no transfer, no sale, no charge that is inconsistent with that inhibition. And I think we've done 3. I thought we would finish all this, but there were more questions. Questions were asked and we went deeper into it, so it's a win. So when we go through conveyancing again, we won't do a question on charges because we've covered, I think, charges comprehensively and restrictions on disposition of land. So the next time when we do another paper on conveyancing, for instance, we will do questions that are different from the ones that were raised in this one, so as to show you how to answer these questions in an exam setting. And that's it to do with conveyancing. Because it's 11 and I'm seeing it's late. We'll leave it out at question number 3. And next time, maybe we can start it off with 4, 5, 6. But they're actually repeating. So you're seeing here, what's the difference between a caution and registration? Mary, that's it. There's a difference. Upon undertaking, how do you remove a caution? It's simple. The answers are in legal notice number 278. We've done actually tax right now. So what registries the documents will be registered and so forth. So I am of the opinion that we call it a night, but I'm open to questions before now we close. Generally on conveyancing, on how to answer questions, and what's your take? Was this session a bit helpful, and are you more confident now to do with the conveyancing paper? Because it's one of the easiest papers to pass. The secret is reading in between the lines. So we've done 3 questions, but we've covered charges, we've covered restraints in disposition of land, we've covered tax, stamp duty, we've covered what else? Yeah, we've covered that. We've covered probably. So are you guys okay? Are you now fine with conveyancing? But are you getting some confidence when it comes to conveyancing? Do you now know where to go find the law with regards to conveyancing? I assure you, in a day, you can comfortably finish the entire conveyancing unit. One day and you're done reading everything on conveyancing, completely everything. So that's fine. Somebody can unmute and then now we call it a day. And I think Sawa. I don't know if Lavins is still in or is absent, but at least today, let me just stop the recording right now, and we can call it a day.